You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So we've talked about the guys that we think are going to be stars for this team. Branson Hickman, Fabechi Wiwu. We do think they'll break out. They'll have big time years. Jacob Sexton, he's gotten a ton of positive pub over the last 7-8 months. Played really well in the bowl game. But it's Jake Taylor that I think people have kind of been up and down on this offseason. I've heard things of like the talent is there. Mentally, he just needs to put it together. Brandon Drum of OU Insider had a nice little update on where Oklahoma's offensive line was and had a note from somebody inside the building. He said, Jake Taylor has really taken a huge leap from where he's been at. He is going to be heavily counted on, and whoever plays the other offensive tackle spot opposite of Sexton could be the make or break spot for the offensive line this year. I mean, so one, Jacob Sexton is going to be your left tackle. And to me, it sounds like Jake Taylor is on track to be your right tackle this year.
That's kind of what I've been saying for a while, right? When I looked at the line, I was thinking it was going to be the Jake and Jake show when it comes to your bookends. And honestly, the tackles can be a little bit more committee. Throw in some Michael Tarkin in there, throw in a little bit of Spencer Brown, get that rotation going. But because I think the interior is where it's going to be the tightest, right? You got the Hickman, you got Fabechi Wiwu, you got Uzeta as well as Gary and Hatchett, and you can rotate around in that. But I think those tackles is where you're going to have a committee. But yeah, I think Jake Taylor, he's making this huge leap, as which OU Insider is reporting. I think 90% of your concerns are gone, because I think that's really where everybody was asking questions. And fun fact, though, we talking about Cam Newton a minute ago. You know that in that season when they won a national championship, he did not throw for 3,000 yards. That is amazing to me that Auburn just refuses to get to 3,000 yards. But I digress.
They hate throwing the football, Jay.
They hate it. The forward pass, as Bobby Bowden would say, the thing that changed the game for him as a coach and why he probably need to make him retire was the forward pass. And that's not something you want to hear from a coach in an era where the pass was going forward for a long time. But anyway, I think Jake Taylor, the Jake and Jake show, is going to be a huge deal next season. Those two guys they're going to be what makes or break the line. I don't think it'll be anything on the interior. It's going to be those that left and that right tackle. And I think that they can live up to it. Hence why Drum pointed out in the tweet that no one around the program has concerns. I think Bill Beaton both sees that they've got that.
I mean, because again, he was a 4-star prospect coming out of high school. You know, he already had great size when he committed to OU. You know, this was a kid that had big time offers from around the country. And I mean, it was Oklahoma that was able to land him, but I mean, he was being pursued in Alabama, that were in his final three. You had Florida State, Colorado, Michigan, Miami, USC, Penn State, Ole Miss, Nebraska, Missouri. The list goes on and on. Like, this is a dude that has a really good foundation. It's just needed time and it needs to develop. If you've heard me say it once, you've heard me say it 1,000 times. Everybody's developmental timeline is different. A guy like Anton Harrison can come in as a true freshman and be a starter at offensive tackle. A guy like Caden Green could come in and be a starter right away, but that's not the case for everybody. And that doesn't mean that they're lesser of players. It just means that they have stuff that they've got to work on to be able to be trusted on the field. Now we're starting to get to the point where Jacob Sexton, Jake Taylor, those are guys that are ready to take the step and ready to take the leap. Again, the foundation is there. The talent is there. It's just a matter of now getting on the field, putting the talent to use, getting that experience that can inform your talent, and then just taking off from there.
Yeah, especially with the weight that he's put on. He's well over 300 pounds out there at the tackle spot. And so with him putting on good weight and good strength, it's that report coming out is probably something around that, right? The summer workouts, they're probably seeing him really put in work in the weight room. And that's where a lot of that confidence comes from, which makes sense. That's where you should feel confident. If you're seeing your guys in the weight room moving weight around and still having the ability to move, be agile, and be able to shift around, absolutely. That's the thing that's going to jump out the most once we hit the field. We just need to see the dudes protect somebody. And we're going to probably see that going into, game 1 against Temple. And then I'm thinking probably the Houston game is going to be the one that really tells us what the offensive line is, especially with Houston being in the Big 12. There's still a possibility that they've got some talent that they've snatched up from somewhere, right? So, and then of course bringing in the new head coach that came from Tulane, who's really good at coaching. That's going to be the big one. What game do you feel like is the one that's going to really be definitive for this offensive line and tell us what they are?
To me, it's Tennessee. If you can hold James Pierce Jr. in check a little bit, I mean, he might get his. You're not going to stop a guy like him from completely disrupting your offensive flow. But if you can contain him a little bit and just not let him wreak havoc every single down, you can win some of your 3rd and long situations and keep him from getting to Jackson Arnold. I'll feel much better about it because they're going to test Jake Taylor on that right side of the offensive line. They're going to put him over there and they're going to make him win that matchup. And if Oklahoma is not having to provide extra help in order to win that matchup with a running back chipping or a tight end providing, that double team over there, then I'll feel much better about where they're heading because he's a first team all SEC selection and a guy that's on his way to becoming a first round NFL draft pick. So if Jake Taylor can hold his own, again, he's not going to win every battle. He's not going to win every snap, but if he can at least neutralize him, go 50-50, and win at least half those snaps, man, you'll feel great about where you're headed because you may not face a pass rusher as good as him until you get to Harold Perkins at the end of the season. Oof. At which point you'll have had 11 games worth of reps and snaps to get you ready for that point. So if we're feeling good that first week of SEC play, man, I'll be feeling great the rest of the year. It's going to take time and it's going to take development, but you get a really, really good test right out of the gate.
Yeah, it makes me a little nervous, him coming off on that against our right tackle on that left side, right? We all know James Pierce is going to do all kinds of. He's going to do some massive things out there for Tennessee. It's kind of terrifying at the same time.
Well, and it's up to Seth Luttrell to scheme for that too.
Yes,
get the ball out of Jackson Arnold's hands quick. Use some, naked bootlegs to catch James Pierce coming, crashing down the line of scrimmage and getting Arnold free and being able to throw on the run. Like it's up to him to take some of the pressure off of Jake Taylor and off of Jackson Arnold when they're facing him. And you can do that. You can schematically do that to help your quarterback and your offensive line. Yeah.
I'm wondering how many GT counters you're going to be able to run to that side of the field.
And sometimes they say you run at them. If you like a guy like Micah Parsons, the NFL has figured out you run at Micah Parsons. You don't run away from Micah Parsons because he's too fast. He's too athletic. He'll chase you down from behind.
Yep.
But if you run at him, you're going to have a much better success rate. So maybe you crash down for Bet You Wee Woo on James Pierce a bunch of times in that first half, and it takes a little bit of the juice out of him. So when you're dropping back to pass in 3rd and long situations, he might not have the same energy and explosiveness.
Yeah, the question is what is this motor going to look like once we get to that point? And that makes sense. I can see Tennessee being a measuring stick. I think the gelling process between Temple and Tulane, those 3 weeks are going to be so critical as to figuring out exactly who's ready to play. And I have like I said, the concerns for us, there's no reason to have one. You got Bill Beatonbow, right? He's been a proven guy for years. I had a couple conversations with some SEC guys, and that was the main thing they talked about was, okay, offensive line, what's going on with that? And I'm like, look, if we didn't have Bill Beatonbow, I'd be nervous about this offensive line. At that point, I would have concerns. I just have the questions, right? It's just him doing what he does best, redoing an offensive line once again. And the good thing is we're young, and you talked about this, right? When you go back to the Heath Zetas, the Logan Howlands, the Joshua Bates, the big thing is there's a bunch of young players that they're pulling from these new classes, from the Brent Venables era classes, that now they're trying to get up to speed. Luckily, they had some veterans on the line and brought in some veterans from the portal like McKay Matower as well as Walter Rouse. Now the thing is molding the young players that they really wanted as young players so they can build it from the ground up. Now we got to see how effective they're going to be. If you look at that, which young player do you think is going to eventually jump out? I know.
Man, I have a hard time, but picking between a couple friends of the show and Heath Ozida and Josh Bates. Those are two guys that I think both at some point will start for Oklahoma and be stars for Oklahoma. I think it's going to come. May not be this year because, again, Branson Hickman at center and then, Hatchett at left guard. You've got some veteran options that give you a really, really solid floor. But for a guy like Heath Ozida, it could very well be this year. He could very well push for a starting role this year. We'll see. I think the floor is solid for Oklahoma's offensive line. And at that point, you're looking at, okay, the potential, the ceiling. I mean, the ceiling is high because you've got blue chippers and you've got talented veterans that have come in. I think they can be really, really good and not just okay.
It's the ceiling is high with these linemen, which is the biggest plus in the conversation. And so, I think that Ozida gets in there and starts at left guard still. I think that they kind of preserve a little bit of Hatchet and you just let Ozida go out there and let him prove himself. And I think he does it. He looks good. Latest set of pictures. Looks a little strong. I'd go with it.
He's a hungry kid. He's quietly confident and hungry, and he's going to go out there and he's going to prove what he can do on the field. He's not going to just sit there and talk about it. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. So go over there, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow us on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram at Locked On Sooners. Follow Jay at Unfair Sports, myself at John 9 Williams. And go check out the new Locked On Sooners Insider program by texting SEC 2024 to 405-817-6711. You can get 25% off your first month. Again, for the Locked On Sooners Insider program, we're going to take your questions and we're going to answer them here on the show through the Locked On Sooners Insider program. So again, subscribe by texting SEC 2024 to 405-817-6711. But until next time, he's Jay Smith. I'm John Williams. Boomer.
Sooner.